Ahora, ¿va a ser sorpresa o no va a ser sorpresa?
ね、まず画用紙を水で濡らして、
Çıplak seversin onu, yalın seversin. Ama çıplak değil.
Human beings can make an estimated 200 vowel sounds and 600 different consonant sounds. We combine them in a near infinite number of ways to make the words of our language, symbols for objects, actions, ideas, and feelings. And then we take this process a step further by creating visual symbols for the spoken symbols. Somehow our brains are able to process this rich diversity of sounds, shapes, and movements together in ways that create meaning. Using language is so basic a human experience that we seldom give much thought to what we would do without it, until something threatens to take it away, which is exactly what happened to a young electrical engineer and software designer, Paul Saylor.
I came back and was talking with Dr. Reich, and my voice suddenly got very gibberish, as I would say, kind of that, just very gibberish sounding. And I knew that I was talking wrong, but I couldn't correct it. I just kept talking in gibberish.
And all of a sudden he started to slump down onto the table, and then he started to, it looked like he was passing out. So I quickly jumped up and grabbed a hold of him.
At which stage Marv screamed out, "D, call 911. And we came running into the office. I called 911 and described that someone had passed out at work and that he was having a seizure.
I was called at home and told that Paul had fainted at work and he was going to be transported to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, I found out that he had had 2 grand mal seizures, and while we were waiting at the hospital, he had a 3rd one.
The next thing I remembered was waking up in the hospital and kind of leaning up and saying, my wife is there, Wendy's there, and I look over and say, why do my arms hurt so much, and why does my stomach hurt so much, and why do my legs feel so bad? Why do they hurt so much? And I was asking these questions of what was, I didn't know what was going on. And so Wendy looked over and said, Paul, you'd had 3 grand mal seizures. I'm not remembering when she had told me or who had told me that when I actually had a brain tumor.
Paul presented to us after having a seizure, and he was found on brain MRI to have a very large tumor in his temporal lobe.
It's not benign, it's a malignant tumor, but it's going to grow at some point, and whenever we see a young person like this with a grade 2 tumor, we really want to take it out.
But the tumor was located in an area of Paul's brain that controlled his ability to use language.
On the one hand, the location of a tumor in a language area, or close to a language area, might make you think, well, maybe we should not do the surgery. However, if we don't do the surgery and the tumor grows, we know that it has one and only one place to grow, and that was directly into a language area.
At the same time, the surgery itself risked Paul's ability to use language.
The greatest risk that we anticipated with Paul's surgery was the risk of his ability to name objects and also to recognize words and to recognize objects. So, for example, if I were to show him a picture of a house and say, what is this called? It would be difficult for him to come up with a word. And in spontaneous speech, he would be talking around that word. So, for example, he might say something like, oh, that thing where people live, that big thing, it's got a door, it's, oh, what's it called? So being unable to find a noun is really quite debilitating, as you can imagine. We need those nouns to communicate very well.
For decades, it was thought language was what made us human, what distinguished us from other animals. More recently, that distinction has been fading. That other animals communicate is a well-established fact. Many species have communication systems that work to ensure their survival. Many, like the warning flash of a white-tailed deer, are very simple. Others are more sophisticated, like the honeybee, which dances to communicate the direction and distance of a new source of nectar. But is this language?
We used to have these nice, neat lines we'd draw. We'd say, language has symbols, other animals don't. Language has grammar and combinations that are productive, and other animals don't. Every single time we lay down a line and say, that's it, don't cross it, this is where language is different from other animal communication systems, it turns out not to be exactly true. It turns out to be a matter of degree rather than some absolute difference. Imagine a Beethoven symphony, and right after that, a baby banging on a xylophone. That's the difference between language on the one hand and other animal communication systems on the other. In the case of the xylophone and Beethoven, they're both music, but one is exquisitely and infinitely more complex than the other.
Humans can often glean basic meaning from animal communications, but we are a long way from being able to talk to the animals using their methods. The flip side is to see if animals can learn human language. For instance, dolphins at the Dolphin Institute in Hawaii have learned a language based on hand and arm gestures. They respond to over 60 words and 2,000 sentences, processing both word meaning and word order.
Very nice. Yes!
I'm going to bring a backpack with some surprises. Would you like some surprises?
At Georgia State University, Kanzi, a 13-year-old bonobo, communicates with researchers by using a symbol board. Each symbol represents a word.
Tell me what food you'd like. So food surprise. Well, Kanzi, would you like a juice or some M&Ms or some sugar cane? M&Ms.
The nice thing about the symbol boards is you have some idea exactly how many times the animals got things right and wrong, and you can do very carefully controlled experiments where you know the animal isn't being cued by something that has nothing to do with the linguistic signal. So they're very well controlled experiments, and I think basically what they were able to show, both with the symbol board and with some later work showing that these animals had actually picked up some more comprehension of English than people suspected.
But even though these animals have demonstrated a surprising degree of sophistication, the jury is still out as to whether they can master the degree of complexity and diversity found in the over 6,000 known human languages.
The more we learn about human languages, the more diversity we see. This, to give you two examples at opposite extremes, if you have a language like Chinese, there are absolutely no endings on words of the sort we're used to in English, like dog, dogs, walk, walked. The way you would say the equivalent of I already ate dinner in Chinese would be something that's loosely translatable as eat, finish. The opposite end, you have languages like Greenlandic Eskimo, where you have a sentence that could be one word with 17 inflections, prefixes, suffixes, and they ripped apart the word in the middle and stick stuff in the middle too, infixes. So you have this extraordinary extreme from this very, very analytic and austere system to this very synthetic and stuffing as much as you can onto the word system. And human babies have to come into the world prepared to learn any of those.